Hello, everyone. This video is going to cover speaking to persuade. When we talk about persuasion, you want to consider that you are trying to create, reinforce, or change people's beliefs or actions. So there's multiple elements to this, an attempt towards persuasion. A huge topic when it comes to persuasion is ethics. So you need to, as you're constructing your speech, consider your goals and your methods and be sure that they would be considered ethical. So you can't be trying to unethically influence people's opinions, give them false information, or I should say, omit things along those lines. So a strong consideration on ethics. When we think about degrees of persuasion, this is kind of looking at it from this spectrum here, where we have this table on the screen. When someone walks into a speech or they start listening to a speech, they're going to show up somewhere on this spectrum in terms of how strongly they agree with your topic. So as you are giving your speech, you're identifying where that person may lie on the spectrum, and you are trying to move them in favor of your point, of your topic. And so the act of persuasion is the movement by a listener from one degree of that spectrum to another. So if someone came into a speech with a neutral position on a topic, and you were able to have them walk away being slightly in favor, then you would have achieved the task of persuasion, persuading someone. And I thought I had more here, I apologize. You are successful in persuasion, even if you only get them to move one position over. Someone may come into a speech being strongly opposed against your view, and even if you get them to move to a moderately opposed position, you have still achieved some level of persuasion. Therefore, you've accomplished your goal of persuading your audience. So don't think that even if you don't get someone to completely agree with you, that you've somehow failed in your mission, because that's not the case. There is what's called a mental dialogue that takes place between you and your listener. So you have to consider that give and take as you are putting your speech together, as you're delivering your speech, and adjusting your approach, having this mental dialogue with your listeners, of course, in order to more strongly persuade them. Your target audience should be the part of your audience that you think that you can persuade the most. So thinking back to that spectrum, try to identify the people that you can make the most impact, where maybe going from neutral to strongly in favor of would be a very big difference, swaying them strongly, where part of the rest of the audience, maybe you could only get them to go from neutral to moderately be in favor of. So look for those people that you can affect the most, get them to change their mind the most. There's three essential types of persuasive speeches. There are those that address questions of fact, those that address questions of value, and those that address questions of policy. Questions of fact are going to deal with a truth or a falsity of assertion. So you're considering something that has a truthful or untruthful element about it, and then exploring that question. So an example of a question of fact in terms of a specific purpose, when you model this, you could say, to persuade, your specific purpose would be to persuade my audience that an earthquake of 9.0 or above on the Richter scale will hit California in the next 10 years. So then a central idea that could accompany that purpose is, there are 3 good reasons to believe that an earthquake of 9.0 or above on the Richter scale will hit California in the next 10 years. So here you're looking at what you believe to be a factual statement, answering a question because you have these facts, and then putting it into action. As you set up that speech with the same general topic, when you create your main points, the first could be California is long overdue for a major earthquake. And I should have given the caveat that going back, thinking of that central idea, that central topic statement, they had said that there are 3 good reasons. So the first, as I said, because it's long overdue. The second, many geological signs indicate that a major earthquake may happen soon. And then the third, experts agree that an earthquake of 9.0 or above could strike California any day. So there are your topic sentences, your main points for those 3 separate portions of the body of your speech. And then of course you'd need to develop from there, but that's how it would all tie into a question of fact in terms of setting up a speech of that type. The second one is the question of value that deals with worth or rightness of an idea or action. So you're wanting your audience to look at something and feel that that topic is of value to consider. So an example of a specific purpose statement: to persuade my audience that elephant trophy hunting is legally and morally wrong. And then having a central idea of elephant trophy hunting violates international accords and our duty to treat animals humanely. So here they're prompting the audience to think about this idea of valuing something. In specific here, it's almost like we're devaluing elephant trophy hunting. And now in terms of main points, elephant trophy hunting violates international accords on species conservation. And then second, elephant trophy hunting violates what moral philosopher Immanuel Kant says is our duty to treat animals humanely, So there's how we would set up a speech with the question of value. The third is question of policy. And this considers whether a course of action should or should not be taken. So there's something that's been happening. What should be done about it? Should there be action taken? And if so, what is it? So there's a few more elements to this type because you want to consider passive agreement. And there's some other approaches too, but the first would be passive agreement, where you're simply trying to convince your audience that a policy is desirable or the approach that you're suggesting is desirable, but you're not actually encouraging them to do anything. You're not encouraging any type of action to take place to support the policy, but more or less to recognize it and say, yes, okay, I agree, and laying the foundation behind it. An agreement example would be, a passive agreement example would be to persuade my audience that there should be stricter privacy standards on companies that offer personal genetic testing. So here, it's not that we're telling them to enact stricter privacy standards, but just saying that, yeah, they probably should happen, at least agreeing or in other cases, disagreeing about something. Immediate action. This is where you are trying to convince your audience to actually take action in support of the policy. So rather than that passive agreement where you're just bringing them into the discussion, you're actually encouraging them to do something about it. So an action example would be, in terms of a specific purpose, to persuade my audience to donate to the Wounded Warrior Project. So right there, an action of donation about a certain policy, in this case, the Wounded Warrior Project. When you're discussing or considering policy issues, you need to think about 3 things in specific as you're modeling your speech. What is the need? Is there a need? What is the plan in terms of encouraging people to agree or take action? And then how practical is it? Are we asking someone to agree with us on something that wouldn't ever happen or is just illogical? So keep those 3 things in mind. Taking that a little further, and I usually repeat myself because I forget I have slides, but in terms of need, is there a problem that actually requires change from the current policy? So whatever the current policy is there a need to actually take action or change it? The plan, what's the speaker's plan to actually solve the problem with the current policy? How do you imagine or envision it may actually be resolved? And then we're going to skip that, but you're more than welcome to come back to the PowerPoint, static PowerPoint presentation and watch that on your own.
Here's the one.
And then in terms of practicality, will the plan that you are presenting actually solve the problem, or could it even potentially create new problems?
California.
This as well. As you are organizing, there are 4 different approaches as you're specifically setting up the speech and how you're organizing, like, okay, I'm going to start with this and then I'm going to go with this. So you can go with problem solution, problem cause solution, offer comparative advantages, or go with Monroe's motivated sequence. So those specifically, there's an example of the problem solution approach here, where you have 2 main points, and those would be the body paragraphs, how you would set that up in your speech. Main point 1 would document the existence of the problem. So, okay, here's the problem, and then main point 2, here's the solution. So very simplistic, and then it gives you a clear-cut path on how to actually organize your speech. Then an example of a problem solution approach is to persuade my audience that the US Congress should pass legislation that will reduce lead levels in the nation's water supply. So identifying the problem that the nation's water supply has high lead levels, and then the central idea, because lead in the water supply is a serious problem in the United States, Congress should pass legislation reducing lead levels in our water. So in the central idea, making it very clear, here's the problem, lead in the water supply. Here's the solution, passing legislation to reduce the lead levels. Main point wise, the first could be lead in our nation's water supply is a serious problem. And then you take it from there with your subpoints and your evidentiary supports. Second main point, solving the problem requires action by the federal government, and then going into detail there as well. The second approach in terms of organization is the problem cause solution, where you would have 3 main points. The first being the documentation of whatever problem exists. So just like that last organizational construct, the problem and solution, but now we're adding in the cause. So we're still identifying the problem, documenting it, but then as the second main point, you're analyzing what's actually caused the problem. And then as the third main point, you're presenting a solution, just like in the last one. As an example, a specific purpose could be to persuade my audience that action is required to deal with the problem of childhood obesity. And then the central idea is going to be set up with that problem cause solution approach. Childhood obesity is a serious problem that can be controlled by changes in diet and exercise. So this one is actually wrapped up where you see the problem as, childhood obesity, but the cause and solution are actually bundled together. So we're saying essentially the cause is lack of diet and exercise, and therefore the solution is encouraging people to change their diet and exercise habits. The problem cause solution main points approach could be childhood obesity is a major problem in the United States. Second main point, there are 2 major causes of the increase in childhood obesity, which we already said were issues with exercise and diet. And then the third, solving the problem requires dealing with both causes, which you obviously previously identified. And then of course, digging in with subpoints, support, quotations, etc. Skipping that. And the comparative advantage approach is where each main point explains why one solution is preferable to another. So almost like a compare and contrast type of approach, where yes, there may be multiple solutions, but which one is the best and why? So an example, as a specific purpose, we could have to persuade my audience that our city should build a rapid bus system instead of a new highway. And then central idea, a rapid bus system will be cheaper and more effective than a new highway. So here there are two options for solutions. There's the bus system and the highway, but overall the bus system is cheaper and it's more effective. So comparatively offering your solution. In terms of main points, you could set up the first one as research models show that we'll save $1 million if we build a rapid bus system instead of a new highway. So there we have the specific approach, the comparative advantage in terms of money. And the second one, research models also show that a rapid bus system will reduce traffic congestion more than a new highway. So there we would be talking about how it's more effective. Monroe's motivated sequence is a 5-step sequence for a speech that's seeking immediate action. So along the lines of some type of action statements. So the 5 steps, you start by gaining attention, making sure that you show why people should pay attention, why they should care. The second step is showing a need for change. So along the lines of what we've already talked about. Satisfaction, that step is providing a solution for the problem. And then the visualization step is where you're actually enhancing the solution that you've presented by visualizing the benefits. So imagining if, the solution was actually implemented, what could happen? What would the benefits be? And then the 5th step would be urging action for that solution because you spent time now getting their attention, showing the need and what could be if the solution is implemented, and then saying, okay, but you've seen all of this and now we need to take action. An example, the first here, to persuade my audience to take class notes by hand instead of on a computer. And then as a central idea, you can learn more and get better grades if you take class notes by hand rather than with a computer. So here you are getting the attention by saying, hey, look, better grades, that's fantastic. And then you would go on to identify the need. Maybe you're not getting great grades. So yeah, there's a problem. And then the solution would be suggesting that they take class notes. And then the next step would be visualizing, okay, so you're going to get better grades, you're taking these notes, it's going to be great. And then the action is kind of all tied up together. So you can see if you do it, here's the solution, here's what's going to happen, and then make sure you take action. I shouldn't have jumped ahead because now here it is. Attention, and then how you break it down in terms of your main points is what we're seeing here. Attention, many of us use a computer to take notes in lectures and other classes. So we have that need identified, that attention idea identified. For the need, despite the popularity of computers, using them to take class notes can reduce learning. So we see, yep, there's a need for something better. Satisfaction, you can avoid these problems by taking notes by hand. Okay, that sounds great. I'm satisfied. Visualization, taking notes by hand will improve your learning and your grades. So looking forward to what it can do for you. Action, so I encourage you to leave your laptop at home and put pen to paper instead. So implementing that solution. And then there's a sample speech, a sample persuasive speech that you can review also through the static PowerPoint presentation on Moodle. And thanks so much for following along, you guys, and best of luck with your organization and your preparation.